Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about why World War II tank armour breaks war games. Now, a couple of months ago I posted a battle report on my blog of a game of Rapid Fire Reloaded that I'd recently taken part in. A great set of rules, really interesting scenario, and a good outcome for the Allies made this a very enjoyable game for me. Afterwards we had quite an interesting discussion about how armour and armour penetration are represented on the Wargames table. It's been a while, but I've been giving it some thought and decided it would make an interesting topic of discussion here on the channel. By the time the Second World War drew to a close in 1945, the tank had evolved from a cumbersome battlefield novelty into one of the defining instruments of modern warfare. Armoured vehicles were at the sharp end of many of the war's most decisive campaigns, from the sweeping steppes of the Kursk salient to the narrow hedgerows of Normandy. But while tank combat in reality was terrifying, complex and brutally unforgiving, recreating those same dynamics on the tabletop was proven to be anything but straightforward. For decades, game designers have wrestled with the challenge of simulating the physical properties of tank armour, the effects of shell fire and the tactics used by real-world crews to survive the chaos of mechanised warfare. In this article, we'll take a close look at how different World War II miniatures wargames have approached the representation of tank armour and explore the historical developments that make it such a nuanced topic. Along the way, hopefully we'll remember the bravery of the men who fought inside those steel beasts and reflect on how tabletop gaming can honour their experiences while providing rewarding and tactically rich play. And tank armour didn't remain static throughout the war. It developed rapidly in response to the ever-growing threat of more powerful anti-tank weapons. In 1939, many tanks were still protected by little more than 30mm of steel on the front glacis plate of the tank. By 1944, vehicles like the German Panther and the Soviet IS-2 sported frontal armour in excess of 100mm, sometimes even more when it was sloped. And sloping was a particularly important innovation. Armour angled at 45 degrees or more dramatically increased the effective thickness of a projectile had to penetrate. It also increased the chance that a shell would deflect or glance off entirely. The Soviet T-34's revolutionary sloped design, combined with wide tracks and a powerful gun, made it arguably one of the most influential tanks of the war. But of course it's not just about armour. Tank crews weren't passive recipients of enemy fire either. They were trained in techniques to improve their odds of survival. A well executed hold down position, where only the turret is exposed over a ridge or obstacle, could make a tank a much harder target to hit. Others would deliberately angle their vehicles at 30 to 45 degrees to an incoming threat, increasing the effective thickness of their frontal armour and turning side hits into glancing blows. All of this, of course, matters hugely in real combat, but how do you translate those factors, sloping armour, angling, hold down positions, into something that's playable, fast, fair, when placed on a 6x4 table? At the heart of this challenge lies a philosophical divide in game design. Should you model armoured combat by focusing on the penetrative power of the gun or the defensive resilience of the armour? Now, games like Flames of War and Rapid Fire take different tacks here. In Flames of War, a 15mm company level game, tanks are rated with both an armour value and a firepower value. Armour is categorised for the front, side and top of the vehicle, while guns are rated for anti-tank strength. To resolve a shot, the attacker rolls to hit, then compares their gun's anti-tank rating to the target's armour. If the shell penetrates, the defending player gets a firepower save to determine if the tank is destroyed, bailed out or otherwise unaffected. Now, this system, while somewhat abstract, does a respectable job at simulating the exchange between gun and steel. It rewards good positioning, so flanking shots are more likely to succeed, for instance, and distinguishes between frontal and side armour. However, it treats all tanks with similar armour values identically, regardless of the subtleties of their design. The sloped plates of a T-34 and the flat frontal plate of an early war Panzer III might both receive the same value, same armour rating, which can flatten that historical nuance. Rapid fire by contrast is more stripped back. Armour and gun values are represented in a relatively simplified chart-based system, which makes gameplay faster, but of course sacrifices some of the detail that gearheads might crave. The fast play version, Rapid Fire Reloaded, is similar. So to see if a shot hits, add or subtract the difference between the gun class and the target's armour class, and modifiers of course. If the result is 4 or more, then you may test for damage. It's a simple, easy to understand mechanic, because this is a game that thrives on the grand sweep of action rather than granular mechanical fidelity. Then there are games like What a Tanker by Two Fat Lardies, which places you in control of a single tank. Here, each vehicle's stats include a number of dice for command, i.e. what you can do each turn, a strike value for your gun, and a defence value representing your armour. More importantly, this system allows for more cinematic, individual manoeuvring, angling your tank for the best shot, trying to reverse behind cover or going hold down. They all become meaningful tactical choices in this game. Because it focuses on the tank as the primary unit, What a Tanker lets players more easily embody the mindset of an individual World War II tank crew. There's something thrilling about lining up a shot on an enemy panzer, knowing you've positioned just right to bounce his return fire. But even here, sloping and armour layout are abstracted. Most armour values are still just a flat number without modifiers for the precise angle of attack beyond front, side or rear. So really we need to talk about defining angles. Where exactly does the shot land? Now, one of the most important tactical questions in any tank versus tank war game is, where does the shot hit? In reality, a shell striking the front of a tank, particularly if it's sloped, has a far lower chance of penetrating than one hitting the side or rear of a tank. World War II tank crews knew this well, and that's why they strove to present their strongest face towards the enemy. A T-34 at a 45 degrees angle was essentially doubling its effective armour. Conversely, a Sherman caught in the flank by a Panther was in dire trouble. Now, most war games simplify this down to a basic set of facings, front, side and rear. In Flames of War, for example, you determine the facing based on the angle of attack in relation to the tank's hull. A shot that originates in the 90-degree arc directly in front hits the front armour. Anything beyond that counts as a side shot, and the rear is often a narrower arc. That seems simple enough until you start turning your vehicle mid-turn or firing from elevated positions. Suddenly determining the correct facing can become a little bit fiddly, especially when using 15mm or smaller models. Now, games like Chain of Command, another Two Fat Lardies offering, handle this slightly differently. In Chain of Command, tanks have a reduced profile and more tactical detail, and while it's a platoon level game with infantry focus, armour plays a vital supporting role. Facing and line of sight still matter, and tanks can go hold down or try to minimise exposure by cover placement. Front, side and rear targeting is determined by simple 90-degree arcs on each side, but again these rules tend to rely on judgment and convention rather than intricate measuring. Is that an acceptable compromise? Well, many gamers say yes, they're popular games. After all, too much precision can slow that game down and lead to arguments, but the more abstract the system, the more you lose some of the subtleties that real-world tank crews used to survive. So let's return to those tactics that tankers use to stay alive. Can we model hold-down positioning and angling in a game without overwhelming the rules? And What a Tanker allows for hold-down as a specific status that provides a bonus to defence, making it both easy to remember and tactically important. Players must use terrain carefully to achieve it, and the bonus might be just enough to bounce an incoming round. Chain of Command also includes the ability to go hold down when positioned behind terrain, which again improves survivability. However, not all games allow players to angle tanks deliberately. In many rule sets, the direction your tank faces is mostly about field of fire, not defensive posture. Now, not including angling in the rules may feel like a missed chance. In real life, angling a tank wasn't just cosmetic, it was often the difference between life and death. A Sherman, for example, could sometimes shrug off hits from German guns if it was angled correctly. Adding this tactic to a game might make movement and firing a bit more complicated, but it would also encourage players to use historically accurate behaviour. But, to play devil's advocate here, maybe the reason rules designers don't generally indulge in that level of detail is the compressed ground scales that we use. On a real battlefield, a tank could hold its angle against a moving enemy 1,000 yards away or more, but on the table, without simultaneous movement and while repositioning a gun by just a few inches could represent a huge distance, even a small adjustment by the firer could completely undo the defender's careful positioning of their tank. At some point, the game's designer may have to abstract for the sake of playability. More detail may seem more realistic, but on the wargaming table, it creates a whole different set of problems. The goal is not to build a spreadsheet simulator, but to evoke the feel of tactical tank combat. Striking that balance is what separates a great game from an overly fussy one. Now, no discussion on World War II tank combat would be complete without remembering that behind every stat card and armour rating was a crew of real people, often very young, facing nightmarish conditions. Tank warfare in World War II was deadly and often short-lived. A hit in the right spot could cause catastrophic fires. Crews lived with the constant fear of being hit by an unseen enemy. Soviet tankers spoke of tanks burning like torches. German panzermen wrote of the horror of Allied air attacks and the dread of massed Soviet armour. American crews nicknamed their Shermans Ronsons after the cigarette lighter, lights first time, every time. Despite all of that, these crews climbed in day after day, hoping to protect their comrades and drive back the enemy. In time, those efforts helped liberate Europe and bring an end to one of the darkest chapters in human history. The tankers of all nations, whether in T-34s, Churchills, Shermans or Panzers, played their part in that titanic struggle. When we play World War II war games, we are not glorifying war. We never are we? At our best, we are exploring history, learning tactics and paying tribute to the courage and sacrifice of those who actually lived it. Good game design can evoke that sense of respect, especially when it encourages players to use realistic tactics rather than Hollywood or heroics. Simulating tank armour on the tabletop will always be a compromise between history and playability, but when done well, it provides one of the richest, most satisfying tactical challenges in wargaming. The struggle between shot and steel is timeless, whether it's a Tiger on the Eastern Front or a Sherman breaking out from the bocage. Games like Flames of War, Rapid Fire, Chain of Command, What a Tanker, each approach the problem differently. Some lean into abstraction for speed, others embrace detail for immersion. All of them in their own way pay homage to the tank crews of World War II and the titanic armoured battles that helped shape the modern world. So as usual, I want to ask for your views on today's topic. In your opinion, what are the best tank rules you've ever played? Are they purely tank on tank rules or part of a wider rule set? And what was it that made them your favourite? It's time for a general hobby update. It will probably come as no surprise when I say I haven't actually got a huge amount done this week. We only got back from our holiday in Turkey at the weekend, and you know what it's like, bags to unpack, washing to sort out, and 100 little jobs waiting for you at home. So hobby progress has been a little bit thin on the ground over the last few days. I mean, that being said, I have been keeping myself busy in a slightly different way. My main priority has been getting a few upcoming scripts written and polished, because the next few weeks are looking pretty full on. For starters, I've got a trip planned down to the darkest depths of Kent, where I'll be meeting up with Paul from Pursuit Wargaming channel for a day of filming. That should be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can come up with together. And then hot on the heels of that is the Other Partisan. Now, if you've been before, you'll know it's one of the highlights of the Wargaming calendar. I'll be filming at the show as usual, which means it's going to be a very long, very busy day. So my plan is to get as much prep work done ahead of time as I possibly can, so that I can turn that show video around as quickly as possible, get it out to you without the minimum of delay. But wait, there's more, because the following weekend, on the 19th of October, the Rejects will be heading over to the Royal Engineers Museum in Gillingham for the Replay Wargame Show. Now, one's a little bit special. It's run in conjunction with the Milton Hundreds Wargames Club, and it's set in an absolutely fantastic venue. We're talking towering exhibits of the Berlin Wall, a V2 rocket, armoured vehicles all around you, and right in the middle of all that, a whole host of demonstration and participation games. Everything from the Zulu Wars right up to modern day scenarios, plus a nice selection of traders. It's definitely shaping up to be a brilliant day, and I'll be there with camera in hand, ready to bring you along for the ride. So that's it for this week. As always, please join the conversation in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. And of course, if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification and consider joining as a member. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.